Breaking. King Charles just made a decision so explosive that Keir Starmer's government is on the verge of collapse. The King has imposed what insiders are calling a royal ban that could end modern British politics as we know it. And what happened in the streets of London in the last 60 minutes will be studied for decades as the moment Britain fractured beyond repair. If you want to understand what's really happening to our country right now, hit that subscribe button because the next 14 minutes will change everything you thought you knew about power in Britain. Here's what sparked the constitutional earthquake that's tearing Britain apart. At 9:47 a.m. this morning, King Charles summoned the Prime Minister to Buckingham Palace for an emergency meeting. No advance notice, no formal protocol, just a royal command that couldn't be refused. The message delivered to Downing Street was chilling. His Majesty requires the Prime Minister's immediate presence on a matter of grave constitutional importance. Starmer arrived at 10:15 a.m. looking visibly shaken. Palace staff later described him as pale, sweating despite the cold November morning. But Starmer wasn't prepared for what came next. The King didn't just suggest or recommend. He issued a direct order that no modern Prime Minister has ever faced. The Constitution would never be the same. Inside the audience chamber, witnesses say King Charles stood rather than sitting as protocol normally demands. His exact words were chilling, and sources who heard them describe a tone of barely controlled fury. Prime Minister, your government's treatment of British military veterans while prioritising irregular migrants has crossed a line I cannot ignore. Effective immediately, I am invoking my constitutional authority under the royal prerogative to suspend all new asylum processing until Parliament addresses the veteran housing crisis. The response was swift and devastating. Starmer, according to two separate palace sources, went bright red and actually shouted at the monarch, "Your Majesty, with respect, you have no such authority. Parliament is sovereign. This is 2025, not 1.625. The room temperature dropped instantly. Private secretaries exchanged horrified glances. One AQ later told friends he'd never witnessed such a breach of protocol in 30 years of royal service. Within hours, the hammer fell. The King's private secretary released an official statement confirming the royal ban. The language was precise, measured, and absolutely devastating. His Majesty has exercised powers granted under constitutional precedent to ensure the welfare of those who serve the Crown takes precedence over political expedience. According to senior Conservative MP Jacob Rees-Mogg, this is the most significant assertion of royal authority since Queen Anne refused royal assent in 1708. The King has just reminded Parliament that sovereignty in Britain is shared. Not absolute. But wait, because there's another layer to this confrontation that makes it even more explosive. Sources inside the palace reveal that King Charles presented Starmer with a dossier during their meeting. A thick folder containing photographs, testimonies, and case files of 47 specific veterans currently living rough on British streets. One photograph allegedly showed a former Royal Marine sleeping in a doorway less than 2 miles from Parliament itself. The King literally placed these photographs on the table in front of the Prime Minister. One witness recalled and said, "Explain to me how this is acceptable in the nation I serve." Starmer reportedly had no answer. He shuffled through the papers, his hands visibly trembling, and then tried to deflect by talking about budget constraints and complex policy considerations. That's when King Charles delivered what insiders are calling the knockout blow. Prime Minister, when policy becomes an excuse for inhumanity, it ceases to be policy and becomes betrayal. The words hung in the air like a death sentence for Starr's credibility. Meanwhile, British veterans who served in Iraq and Afghanistan are living in council flats with black mold, waiting lists stretching 18 months, and pension delays that leave families choosing between heating and eating. James Richardson, a 54-year-old former sergeant who lost his leg in Helmand Province, was evicted from temporary housing just 3 weeks ago. He's been sleeping in his car outside a veterans' charity office in Manchester, queuing each morning, hoping for a hot meal and maybe a shower. "I gave my leg for this country," Richardson told reporters with tears streaming down his face. "And now my country won't give me a roof over my head." His story isn't unique. Sarah Mitchell, a 48-year-old former army medic who served 3 tours in Afghanistan, lives in a mouldy bedsit in Birmingham with her 2 young children. The council offered her accommodation, but the flat had exposed wiring and a bathroom ceiling that had collapsed. "I treated wounded soldiers under fire," she said in an interview that's now gone viral. "And I can't get a safe home for my own kids. What was it all for?" While British heroes freeze in cars and shelters, Asylum seekers are housed in 4-star hotels across London, Birmingham, and Manchester. We're talking continental breakfast buffets, housekeeping services, private rooms with en-suite bathrooms paid for by British taxpayers to the tune of £8 million per day. The Britannia Hotel in Manchester, the Holiday Inn in Birmingham, the Park Plaza in London, all converted into asylum accommodation, while veterans queue at food banks. The contrast is so obscene, so morally bankrupt that even lifelong Labour supporters are calling it a national disgrace. Then something unprecedented happened that nobody saw coming. King Charles broke 70 years of royal protocol established by his mother and directly intervened in government policy. At precisely 11:30 a.m. at Buckingham Palace, he delivered what constitutional historians are already calling the most significant royal intervention since the abdication crisis. Parliament has forgotten that sovereignty carries responsibility, the king declared with barely concealed anger, according to 3 witnesses present. When British servicemen and women sleep rough while foreign nationals enjoy comforts denied to our own people. The constitutional compact between Crown and government demands action. Palace insiders reveal that Charles has been receiving letters from veterans for months. Hundreds of them, handwritten pleas describing homelessness, poverty, and despair. One letter reportedly read aloud during yesterday's Privy Council meeting described a veteran attempting suicide after being denied emergency housing while an asylum hotel opened 2 miles away. The king's voice allegedly cracked with emotion as he read the final line. "Your Majesty, I fought for Britain. Why won't Britain fight for me?" The optics are absolutely catastrophic for Starr's government. The king, traditionally silent and neutral, has publicly sided with veterans against his own prime minister. Here's where it gets really interesting. Because the timing of this royal intervention wasn't accidental, multiple sources confirm that King Charles coordinated his announcement to coincide with Remembrance Week, the most sacred period in Britain's military calendar. Think about the strategic brilliance of that timing. Veterans across the country are wearing poppies, attending memorials, honoring fallen comrades, and in the middle of this national moment of respect for military service, the king drops a constitutional bomb defending those who served. The symbolism is so powerful, so emotionally devastating for Starr that political analysts are calling it a masterclass in royal communication. Professor Catherine Hayden of the Institute for Government said in an emergency analysis published this afternoon, "The king has weaponized British patriotism against his own government. Every poppy worn this week becomes a silent protest against Starr's policies. That's not politics, that's political annihilation." The domino effect has been immediate and devastating. Within 90 minutes of the royal ban announcement, the pound sterling dropped 2.3% against the dollar as markets panicked about constitutional stability. 4.7 billion wiped from the FTSE 100 in a single trading session. Currency traders in London described complete chaos on the floors. One senior trader at Goldman Sachs told Bloomberg, "Nobody knows what happens when the king starts making policy. The uncertainty is killing us." Political fractures opened immediately. 17 Labour MPs have now publicly broken with Starr, including former Home Secretary Ayat Cooper, who released a statement saying, "The Prime Minister has provoked an entirely avoidable constitutional crisis through his stubborn refusal to prioritise British veterans." But that's not even the worst part for Labour. 3 MPs from traditional working-class constituencies have resigned the Labour whip entirely and are sitting as independents. Lisa Nandy, MP for Wigan, reportedly told colleagues in a private meeting, "My constituents are texting me asking why I'm still defending this government. I don't have an answer anymore." International reactions poured in within hours. In Washington, Senate Republicans praised King Charles for standing up for those who served, while the White House issued a careful statement about respecting British constitutional processes. In Brussels, EU officials privately expressed shock that Britain's political stability had deteriorated so rapidly. French President Emmanuel Macron made what observers called a deliberately provocative comment. "It appears Britain's constitutional arrangements are more fragile than we realised." That statement alone sent shockwaves through diplomatic circles. #King Charles's right exploded across social media, trending globally for 14 consecutive hours with over 3.2 million posts. #Starr must go hit 1.8 million posts by lunchtime. TikTok videos comparing veteran homelessness to asylum hotel luxury have been viewed over 40 million times in the last 6 hours. Protests erupted across 17 British cities by 300 pages this afternoon. In London alone, an estimated 40,000 people gathered outside Parliament, waving Union Jacks and chanting, "Defend the Crown, defend our veterans," in Manchester, Birmingham, Glasgow, Cardiff, and Newcastle. Thousands more took to the streets. These aren't organised political rallies. They're spontaneous eruptions of public fury that caught even the organisers by surprise. Inside number 10 Downing Street, the atmosphere is being described as pure pandemonium. Ministers are at each other's throats screaming about who's to blame and who should resign first. Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner allegedly slammed a folder on the cabinet table and walked out yelling, "I'm not going down with this ship." Transport Secretary Louise High was overheard saying to Chancellor Rachel Reeves, "Starmer has destroyed us and he doesn't even realise it yet." Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson reportedly broke down crying during an emergency cabinet meeting, saying, "We're finished. The voters will never forgive us for this." WhatsApp groups with names like Leadership Transition Team are plotting Starr's removal as we speak. The question isn't if they'll move against him. It's which day this week they'll pull the trigger. Senior Labour figures are already conducting quiet polls among backbench MPs to gauge support for a leadership challenge. Names being discussed include Rachel Reeves, Ike Cooper, and even Wes Streeting, though sources say Strering is considered too junior. Keir Starmer looked visibly rattled at Prime Minister's questions this afternoon. Sources say he fumbled basic. The responses and appeared to be reading frantically from notes that kept sliding off his dispatch box. One Conservative backbencher described him as looking like a man who knows his career is ending in real time. Opposition leader Rishi Sunak went in for the kill with a question that left Starmer speechless. Does the Prime Minister believe that British veterans deserve less consideration than illegal migrants? Or does he simply not care about either? But here's the layer that could trigger the complete collapse of Labour's government. Leaked documents from the Home Office show that Starmer's advisers explicitly warned him 3 months ago that veteran homelessness was becoming a political time bomb. A 47-page internal memo dated August 2025, obtained by The Telegraph and confirmed by 2 separate Home Office sources, laid out the exact scenario that's now unfolding. The memo allegedly warned public patience with asylum hotel expenditure while veterans remain homeless is reaching breaking point. Royal concerns about this disparity have been communicated through private channels. Failure to address this urgently risks constitutional intervention. If these documents are real and if they show what multiple Home Office sources claim they show, then Starmer deliberately ignored warnings from his own government about this exact crisis. Think about what that means. The Prime Minister was told veterans were suffering. He was told housing asylum seekers in hotels would cause public outrage. He was told King Charles was personally concerned about the issue and he did nothing. The optics of that would be absolutely devastating because it proves this wasn't incompetence or oversight. It was a deliberate political choice to abandon veterans while protecting his progressive immigration agenda. According to constitutional expert Vernon Bogdanor of King's College London, if the Prime Minister received explicit warnings about royal concerns and dismissed them, he may have violated the unwritten protocols that govern Crown government relations. That's not just bad politics. It's constitutional malpractice. Meanwhile, Nigel Farage is seizing the moment with surgical precision. While Starmer stumbles and Labour implodes, Farage stands wrapped in the Union Jack, looking like Britain's only adult in the room. At a Reform UK rally in Birmingham this afternoon, he declared, "King Charles has reminded us what leadership looks like. While politicians play games, our King stands with those who served. If that's not British values, I don't know what is." The crowd erupted with cheers that lasted over 2 minutes. Farage then pivoted to his killer line. "They call us extremist for wanting to house British veterans before foreign nationals." Well, if that's extremism, then His Majesty the King is an extremist, too. The political judo was brilliant. By aligning Reform UK with the King's position, Farage made opposition to his policies look like opposition to the monarchy itself. The polls tell the story and it's a bloodbath for Labour. A Snap survey by Ipsos Mori shows Labour collapsing to just 23%. Their lowest rating since 2019. The Conservatives hold steady at 28%. Reform UK has surged to an unprecedented 31%. The first time Farage's party has topped national polling in the so-called Red Wall constituencies that Labour reclaimed in the last election. Reform UK now leads by 12 points. In military towns like OT, Colchester, and Catterick, Reform UK support has hit 47%. For the first time in modern British history, Reform UK isn't just a protest movement. They're the most popular party in Britain. Farage isn't just winning the argument. He's winning the country. But wait, because there's one more bombshell that could completely reshape British politics. Senior sources in Reform UK tell us that Nigel Farage has been in private communication with members of the royal household for months. Not with King Charles directly. That would be constitutionally impossible. But with former private secretaries and royal advisors who maintain close ties to the palace. These sources claim that Farage was given advanced warning that royal patience with Labour's veteran policies was exhausted. If true, that means Farage positioned Reform UK to capitalise on this exact crisis weeks before it exploded into public view. The strategic coordination would be breathtaking. It would mean that while Starmer ignored warnings, Farage was preparing to ride the resulting storm straight into Downing Street. The next 72 hours are absolutely critical for Britain's future. Starmer faces a confidence vote in Parliament on Thursday that he may actually lose. If enough Labour MPs rebel or simply abstain, his government falls and Britain heads to snap elections. King Charles must decide whether to use further royal prerogatives if Parliament refuses to act on veteran housing. Some constitutional experts are whispering about possibilities nobody wants to say out loud. Could the king refuse to sign legislation? Could he dismiss ministers? Could he even dissolve Parliament itself? And Reform UK is preparing what sources describe as the most aggressive political campaign in modern British history. Targeting every marginal seat Labour holds. Campaign posters are already being printed, featuring side-by-side images. Homeless veterans on one side, luxury asylum hotels on the other, with the caption, "Who does Labour serve?" The question is no longer whether Starmer survives politically. It's whether the entire British political establishment survives the earthquake that King Charles just triggered. Britain is watching a constitutional crisis unfold in real time that makes Brexit look like a minor disagreement. This crisis will be studied for decades as the moment when the British monarchy reasserted powers everyone thought had vanished centuries ago. At its epicenter stands Starmer, who looks increasingly isolated, desperate, and critically finished. History will remember this as the day British politics fractured into before and after. Not since Edward VII abdicated in 1936 has Britain faced such a fundamental constitutional crisis. This could be bigger than the expenses scandal, bigger than Brexit, bigger than anything we've seen in living memory. The last time a British monarch directly challenged Parliament's authority with such force. It led to civil war. We're not there yet, but the constitutional foundations that kept Britain stable for 3 centuries are cracking before our eyes. Cambridge historian Dr. David Starkey said in an emergency television appearance this evening, "We are witnessing the death of one constitutional order and the birth of another. What replaces it will define Britain for the next 100 years. So here's the question that matters, and I want your honest answer. Did Keir Starmer just commit career suicide by challenging the king? Or did King Charles overstep his constitutional authority and give Starmer the fight he needs to survive? Will Nigel Farage actually become Britain's next Prime Minister on the back of this crisis? And here's the really uncomfortable question nobody in Westminster wants to ask. If the king can suspend asylum processing with a royal decree, what else can he do? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one, and your perspective matters because this isn't just about politicians anymore. This is about what kind of country Britain becomes. And if this story shocked you as much as it shocked us, share it with everyone who needs to see what's really happening in Westminster right now. The mainstream media won't show you the WhatsApp messages, the leaked documents, or the panic behind closed doors. But we will, tomorrow. We're breaking the story about what really happened in that Buckingham Palace meeting and why 3 cabinet ministers are preparing resignation letters as I speak to you now. We're also investigating claims that palace officials have been coordinating with opposition parties for weeks. This constitutional crisis is far from over. In fact, it's only just beginning.